Hey guys, sorry about the lighting and probably the sound too since I'm in my garage. This video is going to start out with Mark Zona speaking about fishing for big smallmouth in southeast Michigan. He talks about fishing Lk Erie, the Detroit River Lk St Clair, and I actually got to ask him a question. Really good talk. Mark Zona is one of the guys I respect the most in the bass fishing industry. He's just a wealth of information. After that, I'm going to include 2 clips from my last 2 trips of the year. One was a smallmouth trip, one was a musky trip. The smallmouth trip, I only caught a few fish, but I did catch a 5-pound, 3-ounce, 22 1/4 inch smallmouth, beautiful fish. I'll show you that clip. And then I also took a musky trip, which I thought was a dud because I fished for 4 or 5 hours, didn't get a bite, didn't get a follow-up. And then I packed everything up and was gonna head back into the launch, and I thought, well, you're about a mile from the launch, why don't you throw a line over and troll back in? And about 5 minutes in, this giant hit in the dark. So I didn't get the catch on film, but I am gonna show you the fish, a 25-pound, 46-inch muskie. So here we go.
And I said this earlier, a lot of you were in that seminar earlier, is a lot of what I'll talk about is fishing around here. Fishing from here to St. Clair to Erie, all the way to the west side, fishing White Lake, Muskegon, and all kind of the places that I grew up on. See, you rattled me. I was ready to go with the swim bait deal. So, but let's talk about tube fishing and net rig fishing. And a lot of what I said earlier, and we'll do a question and answer. You know, when I get done with this, a lot of what I talked about earlier actually applies to tube fishing and net rig fishing. Okay. But back when I used to fish a lot of derbies, when I was your age, I started fishing tournaments when I was 11, and then I got married and fished a whole lot more tournaments. It's interesting, I won Angler of the Year in 2000, I think it was 2001, 2002, in the Everstarts, which is now, I think it's called the Toyota Series. I'm sorry, they've renamed it like 37 times. But it was long before you guys were born, probably. And I'll never forget this. I wanted to win Angler of the Year in that more than anything, more than winning a tournament, more than, this sounds shallow, I don't want my wife to hear this, more than making a house payment, and at the times that's what we did. But there was guys that were in there, the Steve Clappers. Anybody know who Steve Clapper is besides these 3 down? The dude is an assassin. And there was so many other anglers that fished that, where to me they were my mentors, smallmouth fishing. And if I could beat them, then I could go to whatever the next level was. The next level ended up drastically changing and was television. But I'll never forget the year that I won Angler of the Year in that. A dude called me. He's a writer, and he said, man, I want to walk through your season. I said, okay. And he said, how'd you catch him on Lake Vermilion? I said, well, you know, I caught him on a tube, and I was using a 3/8 ounce head. All right. Give me the depth, blah, 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 blah. Goes to the next tournament, and the next tournament was Sandusky Bay, and I was in the top 10 there, and he said, how'd you catch him there? I said, man, I caught him on a tube. Long story short, the 3rd tournament, I caught him on a tube, and the 4th tournament, I caught him on a tube, and he made a comment to me that kind of, at the time, pissed me off. He goes, man, not very versatile, are you? And I thought, no, not really, I guess. I said, hey, you called me. Didn't call anybody else, bro. And I thought about that comment that he made. For months, and I dwell on things. Like, I'm a grudge holder. I'm Italian, man. I thought about that comment that he made, and here's the interesting thing, now that time has gone on. I was versatile with that bait. Everywhere I went, I caught him on that. No matter how I adjusted it, I caught him on a tube. And it's eerily similar to, look man, I grew up not with a lot of money. So I buy a handful of baits and figure out how to catch them where I went with that bait, and that bait was a tube. And as years went on, you want to learn everything. You want to learn a jig and a swim bait and all cool stuff, like when a drop shot came out. But I always went back to my best friend being a tube. It was what I always call, it was the panic lure. When the panic button went on taping the Zona show, and Dan Kimmel and his friend next to him are my camera boat driver, we're throwing a tube. The reason why, and I said this earlier when you asked this question, the reason I throw a tube, it looks like every single thing our largemouth and smallmouth put in their mouth. Period. From a crawdad to a goby to whatever it is. And I'm going to rewind to a tournament that was on Lk Erie back in the day, and this is the early 2000s. And this is where the light bulb went on for tube fishing, okay? I work for a company called Bassmasters, and I cover their tournaments, and I read all the articles that you guys read the last 2 decades. When it's calm, go as light as you can. When it's windy, make sure you go heavy where your bait can get down there, right? We all read that same article, okay? I grew up where I'm like, that's what you're supposed to do. First day of this ever start, I run down the North Shore to an area down the North Shore that's still pretty popular, and I go down there and I maul them on a 4 ounce tube, okay? Get to the stage, you're holding the fish, and called Karen. I said, I'm in second or third, which I was generally in second place every tournament, but I cracked them. And they were on very certain things. It's not really what's important. They're in about 9 to 13 feet of water. And I go back there the next day, and dude, I'm fired up. I caught 40 to 50 the first day. And I told her on the phone, I said, if I don't win, we got a top 3. Got him. I'm dialed on it. I put the trolling motor down, not go through the juice, and I come back dry. I got a green pumpkin tube. I got 8-pound line. This is how long ago? This was back before fluorocarbon, okay, dude? It was called mono back then. I go through this area, and I've got a half dozen distinct rock piles. I fish every one of them, and I catch 1 bass that weighs 2 pounds. And so you know, this is back before the live scope days, you know what I mean? Like it was called fishing back then. So I go back through these areas, and I catch nothing. I'm like, man, what's going on here? And arrogantly and ego, I looked at my co-angler and I said, dude, I caught them all yesterday. You're on Lk Erie. How many of you fish Lk Erie? How many of you fish Lk St Clair? You did not catch them all. I thought in my mind, if I didn't catch them right now, I've done caught them all. And it was weird. Now I start to panic, and I'm gonna go back to the river. I'm gonna flip me some largemouth to make. Now I'm thinking, wow, I gotta apologize to my wife. We're not gonna get that top 3 I promised. I'm in trouble. Out of nowhere, I reach down in my rod locker, and I had a different color tube tied on. And I pull it out, I launch it. I don't even look what's inside of it. I launch it. When I tell you folks, it is as calm as this lake right here on Erie. And I throw it out there, and I watch my line go to the bottom. I'm like, oh, I got too big of a jig head on there. And I watch my line go poof. And I come back, I said, dude, I got one. Co-angler nets it. It's 4-pounder. And I'm panicking, I'm as quick as I can, I put him live well, throw back. The tube falls. like a bullet. Toonk. Folks, I mean this. I had been throwing there for 3 hours and caught a 2-pounder. Long story short, catch a big bag quickly, and my buddy is about 500 yards down, and I pull the head that's inside of it, and it was a 1/2 ounce head inside that tube. And that day changed the rest of my fishing lifetime. In tournaments, on Zona show, and I learned everything that I had read was the polar opposite of what I just learned, okay? Those fish had sat there the first day, there was more wind, ate my 1/4 ounce tube, stuff like that. Smallmouth don't like you kidnapping their buddies, putting them in your live well and taking them. They tend to not like you the next 2 or 3 days. They knew exactly what the mousetrap was with a 1/4 ounce or a 5/16 ounce head, and all that 1/2 ounce head did was show them the exact same bait differently. They didn't have time to think about it. There's a dude, his name's Randy Ramsey, he was my roommate. He was a 1/2 mile down. I looked at my co-angler, I said, catch your 5. I said, I gotta go. I guarantee you he's struggling. I pulled up to him, I said, what do you got? He said, I got 0, see? He was throwing a 1/4 ounce tube. I took a handful of 1/2 ounce heads. Now, the sucky thing is, he almost beat me in the tournament, so I don't know that I was that kind about that again. But the whole key, the whole entire key, was that tube going as fast as it could get to the bottom. It's like those fish had not seen a lure till that one cast. That is the exact story of what's gone on in my lifetime of the system that I've created for tube fishing. From the rod, I make rods for tube fishing, from lures to the line to the reel. I throw all of my tubes, every one of them, on straight fluorocarbon, okay? Every single one of them. The reason why? It looks like when I'm cracking a tube, it looks like I'm jamming that thing. I'm not at all. If you look at a craw, I'm weird, dude. I like watching sharks hit seals. I like watching things get eaten by other things. And I used to snorkel and look at how food that bass eat move. And if you look at a goby, if you look at a crawdad, they dart. They dart at about 6 to 12 inch intervals. If you look at a sculpin on the bottom of the lake, you rarely see just a happy fish swimming on the bottom of the lake. You see them slowly being dragged around when the water's cold, but when that danger sign goes off, that the wolf is in the area, they dart. And they dart in short darts. So when I'm cracking, it looks like I'm moving at about 3 to 4 feet. When I'm using this Mark Zona rod that's 7 foot 2 inches, it looks like when I'm doing this, that bait is going toom, 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 toom. It's not. It's going about this far. It's going about that far. All I'm doing is popping the slack, and it's making that bait scoot, okay? I talked about something earlier, and I said, when I drop shot fish, I don't even think I own a 1/4 ounce head on my drop shot. When I tube fish or I throw a Ned rig, I don't think I own anything under a 3/8 ounce again. I don't want my tube or I don't want my Ned rig to look like a boat that's next to me. Something that's happy on the bottom of the lake. I want it to look like it's in danger, it's got issues, because everything around it's gonna go, what was that? What was that? The other thing, and I don't talk about this enough on my show or my videos, I brought it up to a lady that asked a question earlier. She said, you know, my bait, my drop shot or my tube or whatever hangs up in grass. I purposely want my tube or my Ned rig to hang up in grass. I want to disturb an area. I want to disturb a boulder. I want to disturb a rock, whatever it is. The other thing is when I'm doing this, and then all of a sudden I do it faster when I've got one, I truly mean this. I do not feel 9 out of 10 bites that I get on a tube. My rod just does this, and it loads. And if it's not a fish, I'm hung on a rock, okay? That is exactly the system that I fish this with. The only time that I'll upscale, and line is probably what I get the most question on. Predominantly, 90% of the time, I throw 8-pound Seaguar fluorocarbon, okay? Whether it's yellow label, red label, Tatsu, it's whatever I grab, okay? But the main thing about this whole system, the main thing, reach out and touch somebody. Get that thing as far out as you can, because a lot of the fish that bite this, it goes back to that tournament I talked about on Erie. When I bound that ½ ounce out, he hit it. When that thing hit the bottom, my line went boom. That's why this rod, I made this for that. Because this rod, basically, when it loads up, I got him. Because this rod is way more backbone than it is tip. People call this a finesse presentation. It is not. And it is the exact same way that I'll fish a little tube or I'll fish a Ned rig, okay? I don't know who asked me about if I was going to talk about a Ned rig. You apply the same thing to it. I throw a 3/8 ounce Ned rig 99.9% of the time. Cold water, warm water, spring, summer, fall. It falls like a rocket. And to me, that's what makes the light bulb go off. The only time I will go to a braid, to a fluorocarbon leader, is on a small tube or a Ned rig. I will use a braided line to a fluorocarbon leader on a small tube or a Ned rig. Any 3 to 3.5 inch tube, I am throwing 90% of the time. I'm going to throw a straight fluorocarbon line, unless I'm in the Detroit River and I want to throw braid where I can get a hook into them quickly because of current, okay? And the biggest thing with this is, if you watch a Zona show or you watch a lot of the YouTube videos that I put out there, here's the main thing to tell yourself when you're doing that and you're sitting there popping that on the bottom and your rod starts to do that, he's on it. All you got to do is keep cracking to dig the hook up into the roof of his mouth and reel as fast as you can reel to load the rod up. The main thing where things go wrong, tube fishing or Ned rig fishing, where things go wrong is at the end of your cast, okay? If he bites it out there and goes ballistic and is jumping all over there where that kid's wearing that orange hat, or he's dogging next to the boat, this rod lets you own him, okay? If you use a 6.5 foot rod for tube fishing or Ned rig fishing, you're fixing to hurt your own feelings. I use a 7.2, a 7.4, or a 7.6, so if he jumps out there, I'll come back on him even harder to put him down in the water so he won't jump again. The other thing is, and you guys know this if you fish for smallmouth or largemouth around here, when they start doing that stuff next to the boat, you want a rod that you can turn his head around, or else he's going to keep going that way, right? That's the biggest thing. If you unload the rod out there when he jumps and he gets slack on you, or you unload the rod right here, you will lose him. The only way to control that, grind on him. Grind on him. I do try to play them a little more for television, just because some of the fights only last 3, look, my show's a ½ hour long. I gotta play it out a little bit. But most of them, when I get them next to the boat, I'm a manhandler, because if you don't, he's gonna get the best of you, okay? The only thing that I could tell you, we talked about this a little bit earlier, I don't find cracking a tube is that good below 50 degrees of water. It's gotta be above 50. Anything below 50 degrees, it's always more of a drag. And I hate fishing like that, but that's what I've learned in 40 years doing this with a tube. Under 50, they want it drugged. You get above 50, it's like the light bulb goes on and they want it trying to get away from them, okay? Let's ask some questions on this. And guys, you can ask questions about anything, okay? We'll give some stuff away right when I'm done. And real quick, if you ask any questions, make it loud so I can hear you. What angle's the eye? His question is, what angle is the eye of the tube head? The majority of mine are all 60s. All 60s. They'll still, I want them to hang up. I don't want them to completely hang up. You know what I mean? And that seems to be the balance. And look, you can get into, his question is the angle of the eye. You can get in a flat eye, a straight eye. I tend to want to use a straight eye in grass, and I want to use a flat eye in all my tube heads on rock. On that head, it's just basically it's at 9 o'clock, okay? His question is, what is the biggest fish that I caught on a tube? I want to say my biggest smallmouth was on a tube. It was not on a tube. It was on a jerkbait. This is, I got to get, hold on, it's a good question. The biggest smallmouth I ever caught in my life, we were in Buffalo, and we were done taping for the day, okay? We were done at like noon. And it was the right time of year, it was May, and the big ones were coming up. They were cockroaching up on boulders and 10 to 20 foot of water, and I had a boulder. And when I say I had a boulder, it was half the size of this boat in 11 feet of water, and they come up to 4 foot under the surface. I taped on it 20 years ago, I taped on it 9 months ago. It's a good rock, okay? So I'm jerkbaiting, right? On a deep jerkbait. And we're done taping. Cameras are put away, and we're having what's called a crew day, which we do about once or twice a year. So my camera guy's in the back of the boat, and he was a smoker. He's in the back of the boat, and I set the hook. I said, dude, I got a big one. I said, get that camera back out. He's like, it ain't that big. I'm like, it is the biggest one I ever caught. So I get in the boat, I come up like this, I'm like, and we don't have the cameras out, and his tube is out there, right? His tube's out there. And I put it on a scale, it's a smallmouth, and I said, wow, man, 715. I've caught a lot of 8-pound largemouth, but 715 on that jerkbait, that was my biggest smallmouth, right? This is back before like selfies and Instas, books, stuff. I'm like, dude, take a picture or something, man. Let's get a camera out. And he's like, yeah, bro. And he goes, I'm hung on a rock. And he's going like this. And I got this fish, and it's catch and release season, right? I got this fish in my hands. No, I'm sorry. It was not catch and release season. New York, you can keep one bass over 20 inches. Junior, this fish is 23, right? And all of a sudden, I'm hung on a rock. And he starts, and I'm watching him, and the line starts coming up. I said, dude, you ain't hung on a rock. And it comes up. I said, it's bigger than mine. Net it, get in the boat. I just weighed mine, and I weigh his. It says 8.2. It's his first smallmouth ever. I said, dude, hang it up, be done with this. You need to stop smallmouth fishing, cannot top this, right? And he goes, Z, I'm never gonna catch one bigger, dog. Can I keep it? I said, and this is kind of even before replicas. I said, I don't blame you, man. I said, you should. I let mine go, puts in a live well. My buddy calls me, who lives 70 miles east of Buffalo, and he goes, you got a show? I said, yeah, dude. I said, I can't. I said, I caught a 715. I said, my camera guy caught an 8.2. I said, it's in the live well. And it went quiet, right? He said some words, and he said, you need to get to a grocery store. He goes, dude, you got a state record in your live well. Here's the problem, guys. Our production crew, my business partner, cannot stand when the camera guys fish. So I said, dude, I think you broke the state record. He's like, hey, no big deal, you know, it's no big deal. We don't need to know if it is or not, and stuff like that. He's like, we don't need Mike back at the office to know that I was fishing today. I'm like, nah, we gotta go. So this fish had been sitting in a live well for 4 hours. State record was 8-1, 8-2 broken, right? We go to the Piggly Wiggly in Dunkirk, New York. Do you know what a Piggly Wiggly is? So we bring a smallmouth in there in a trash bag, right? I'm like, hey, you guys gotta meet. We had to have something certified. We had somebody from the state meet us at the store. Walk in, and it goes 8-1, 8-1, 8 even. And I open the live well, and the thing spit up about 3 ounces of crawdad. So the dude, legitimate, anyway, sorry, that was a long story, but that fish was caught on a tube. So I have no idea what that story meant about anything. But anyway, go ahead. His question is, what piece of electronics on the front of my boat would I not want to live without? I can survive without live technology. I can survive without Mega 360. I cannot survive without my mapping. My mapping to me is, and don't get me wrong, live scope, Mega Live, Mega 360. To me, Lake Master mapping is the most critical. And here's why I say that. Look, I just saw Dobson around the corner. We can go to areas where we've grown up fishing the last decade or 2 decades. We know it with our eyes closed. We can go to bed and know what the ground. But when I go somewhere I've not been, that mapping to me is light years ahead of anything else in my boat. I can give, if anything goes out in my boat on a lake I've never been on, the thing I pray that doesn't is my mapping. Because I can still, you know, I hate to say it, I take the show with, anybody know who Corey Johnston is? He's a bad dude. He is really good at, he's as good at smallmouth as that dude is right there, okay? He is good. And that's Scott Dobson, he's as bad as they get. We taped the show and he was staring at my Mega Live, and I gotta break away from it at times, so I just start throwing. And I catch one, and he made a comment in that show. It made the show. He goes, wow, you actually caught that fish fishing like we used to do. I think all of it's a tool, but the tool I'd never want to be without is my map. Anybody down that way? Go ahead, scream out your mouth.
I fish the Detroit River quite a lot. I know you do too. What's your favorite technique to use in that current?
His question is, he fishes the Detroit River a lot, and I do too. What's my favorite technique? Did you say, also say, and where? There's a smokestack in the background. You know, what's funny is, I grew up with fishing against Scott back in the day, but to this point, what really makes, to me, the Detroit River special, especially when you get into the full moon of September, when that bait pushes into the mouth of that river, you find schools in that 12 to 22 feet of water. But to me, what is the most special is when you find a pothole in that grass in 4 to 6 feet of water, and there is 50 sitting in there, and you can spinnerbait them, or you can thunder cricket them. And what I say is rough talk them with 20-pound line. That to me is the most fun on planet Earth. And really, a lot of times, to this day, what's funny is a lot of those spots, those magic spots in the Detroit River, the St. Clair River, they reload year after year, but there's more out there. And I remember there was one tournament in practice I was sucking in. I was doing, it was horrible. This looked 23 years ago. And I was talking to my wife on my cell phone, and about a quarter mile away, I saw about 200 seagulls dive. And I said, I gotta go. I'm on them, right? I didn't even know what was there. I said, I'm on them, but I don't know what's there. And what I look for in the fall, in the mouth of that river, if I see one bird, that's what I'm chasing. Because that bird is gonna tell me where the mouse is. And if I find the mouse, the owl's gonna be near him. And there's gonna be a lot of them. Right. So here's the one thing I'm gonna say in a very broad stroke. If they're there in the mouth of the river or in the Detroit River, they're biters, man. It's not like they're not biting. Keep going and keep going, and they'll let you know when you found them, generally.
Exactly.
But just remember, here's what I always, the biggest thing about the Detroit River, especially in the mouth, always know where you set the hook, because that spot may only be half the size of the deck of this boat.
Exactly, yeah.
If you drift off 100 yards and you're FaceTiming, right, you just got off the juice. A lot of times now, with spot lock and stuff like that, you set the hook, you lock in, because it's usually a cast spot. Great question, great question. What is my biggest saltwater fish? I caught a big bull shark. I caught a lot of lemons. I talked about hammerheads earlier, but I caught a bull shark that I wasn't supposed to catch him. He ate what I was reeling in, but he was a good one. He was not a nice fish either. He was a good one. Say it again. What is my favorite brand of fishing gear I use? I think I use it all. But I grew up and it's my job. Strike King and Lose is near and dear to my heart. When I don't throw that stuff, I do throw a lot of Mega Bass stuff. I think I can get by with all of that stuff. That's a good question. Selfishly, the reason a lot of the Strike King stuff is the majority of what I use, my fingerprints on a lot of it. As far, you're supposed to design. This is a terrible marketing thing. They would never like to hear me say this. You're supposed to design things a lot of times to catch fishermen, not fish. The majority of what I've designed is things that I sell. I hate to say this, I don't care if people buy them, but I'm going to design things that I know I need. But it's translated through the show and stuff like that. A lot of what I've had my hand on striking, I hate to say it, it's for lakes within 200 miles of the door of this show. It's for us. Good question. Give me it again. You're that kid, aren't you? He said if I ever had to pick one lake the rest of my life, what would it be? It's called Menderchuck. Yes. Good luck finding it.
You made up a name.
In all honesty, it by far and away would be Lake Ontario. I live in the state of Michigan. I love St. Clair. I love going up north. I grew up on these lakes. To this day, I still fish Ontario, and it's been that way since I married my wife 25 years ago. I fish there more a year than I do lakes in our state. It's not as easy as it once was, but to me, it's weird. It's still the untapped. To me, the other untapped is the UP, and my other amount of time. The problem with the UP and Lake Michigan, it's a lot like Lake Huron. You can go not hours, you can go days and weeks and not catch a bass. But when you find them, they're all yours. There ain't nobody else there. You might see a walleye dude out there dragging a crawler around. He ain't after what you're after. But in the last few years, I've spent more time trying to find that sort of, and what's bad about it is you strike out, but when you do hit on a Huron, or you hit on a Lake Michigan and the Upper Peninsula, you'll never see another boat. I did a show called, that I named the place Saskatoon Bay. There is no Saskatoon Bay. I think the set fighter, and it was one of the biggest schools I've ever seen, and it was up in the UP, and I said, dude, I cannot name where we're at. I can't do it, because there were 0 bass boats at any of the boat ramps, and I called it Saskatoon Bay. I was at a sports show 2 years ago, or a year ago, was when the pandemic lifted, and a guy came up to me, he had a map book. He goes, I've looked tirelessly for Saskatoon Bay, and I just can't find it. I said, you keep looking, dog. You keep looking. Anyway, good question. Would I rather fish a rock flat or a grass flat? I'd rather fish one where the rocks meet the grass, right? Whenever you find a mix of cover or structure, largemouth, smallmouth, that's a stop sign. Look, man, you can go out of Lake, anybody fish Lake Charlevoix? Awesome. You can go out of that pier head and go 5 miles north, 5 miles south, and see the best rock on planet Earth. Tell me if you catch one. I've never caught a bass on that stuff, but what's interesting, I don't want to get it exact, Saskatoon. If you go north, that rock will find grass. That's where they're at. Wherever you find a mix, what I look for a smallmouth, what I look for a largemouth, where does sand meet rock? Where does rock meet grass? Where does grass meet sand? Those are the irregularities. Those are the highways that a smallmouth or a largemouth will use. Very rarely is it just a boulder flat for 20 miles, and you'll find there's always got a smallmouth likes irregularities. They like something that just quite doesn't look like it's supposed to be there. Good question. What size? That's a really good question. What size reel do I use for tubes? I use a Lose 300 custom light. It's a very, very light reel, good drag, but most of all, it's got a big spool, so I can do exactly what I said. I can get it out there. The other thing that it does, a big spool, I am able to turn line. If a smallmouth bites from me to where that dude's at, and he bites out there, I need to turn line fast. You can't turn line on a 200 size reel or 2000 size reel like you can a 3. Good question. One more. What's the ratio? I believe this is it's a 200,000 size reel. It's not the reel that I would use for tubing. Generally the ratio I want is, and that's high for a spinning reel, is I want something between 6 and 7, right? One rotation, and that turns 6 to 7 times. His question, that's a great question. It's, what advice could I give an amateur that's just starting out? Find out what your fastball is, okay? The baddest co-anglers that dude has drawn in his life, and that I've drawn in my life, they get in the boat, they got about 3 rods and a little lunch pail bag of baits. That's the dude to look out for. The dude that gets in the boat, back at Dobson's boat, and has a tackle box this big, and it looks like he dropped a hand grenade in it by the end of the day, that's not it. And here's what I mean by that. The 2 things that I live with the most is a tube and a jig, okay? He lives with a jerkbait, a jerkbait, a jerkbait, and that's his fastball. He's good at everything. I think I can fish everything, but when you gotta pull the panic pin, you better have your and you gotta know what it is.
Drop shot.
And usually a fastball is something that works all year long, that you can adapt to some way, shape, or form to any lake you're on. Look, Kevin Van Dam has made a career on a crankbait. Yep. It's not that he doesn't know how to do anything else, but he knows his fastball. You know what I mean? He knows what he needs to go to when you gotta pull the pin and blow things up. The worst thing to do is when they're not biting, say, I'm gonna try 310 lures I bought this week. By the end of the day, you've got 310 lures laying in the bottom of the boat. Folks, it's awesome to be back home. I gotta tell you, that was a really cool story that I wanted to tell you about my camera guy. I'm gonna give you this rod and reel for that one, okay, bud?
Oh, boy.
Have a good New Year, folks. Thank you very, very much. It's awesome to see you both of you again. There you go, bud. Don't sell that on eBay tonight, okay? I'll buy it back. Thank you again, folks. Have a great year fishing.
not exaggerating, that guy just jumped almost 3 feet out of the water. It's a big fish. Smallmouth, for sure. Not want to move. Wow. It's going to be a good one. Fish. Real good fish. Come here. Oh yeah. Oh boy. I'm gonna have to get a weight on this one. That's a good fish. Look at that one. That's a great fish, man. That's 4.5, I think. Maybe I'll have to get a weight on it, but great fish. GoPro, stop recording. Okay, guys, I just weighed this beauty. It is 5 pounds, 3 ounces. I kind of undersold that one. That's a 5-pounder. Great fish, man. Look at that belly. Okay. Oh. There's my fish of the day. Beautiful fish, man. Man, that was a fun fight. Beautiful. Gotta get her back in.